Good evening. My name is Gleb Antonov, and I still didn't find a placement for the host of Project Graphium 9. Therefore, I'd like to tell you about my next revolution in Russia. And from the first place, I'd like to say that I'm really grateful to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. I think he did an incredibly amazing job in Russia. It was very difficult times. However, if I have something to criticize him, I would always say how I would have done better if I was a president. And for that purpose, I say officially that today, 29th July of 2020, I start my presidential campaign for next elections in Russia in 2036. Thank you so much, it's a great honor. And for that matter, I'd like to tell you how I would reform Russian economy. And for you to better understand me, you need to know how economy works and what Russian economy looks like. And I would say it's pretty much poor economy because it's totally depends on natural resources and basically oil. So the whole economy really depends on prices for oil. You can see it on the next graph. In 1970, average price for oil was rather high, around $80 per barrel. Soviet people didn't live much better than Americans. In fact, they didn't have like washing machines, like MP3 players, and just basic home appliances. However, communists still found some money to invade Afghanistan, and it made Ronald Reagan upset. So he imposed sanctions against Soviet Union, which led that price for oil dropped to $24 per barrel, and which led to consequent process of collapse of Soviet Union. And then democratic government came to power in Russia, and 90s were really difficult, and price for oil was average like $40 per barrel, which was fine, but still was very complicated times. And then in 2000, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin came to power, and it was the best times for oil prices because average was around $120 per barrel. And I would like to criticize Vladimir Vladimirovich because if I was the president, I would rather invest those huge oil incomes. I would rather spend them on building infrastructures, productions and manufacturers instead of spending them on some national projects. And in 2014, Western world imposed another sanctions against Russia, so the oil price fell to $60 per barrel, and then it was constantly decreasing, negative growth, and in 2000, like even 5 months ago, the price for oil was as low as $18 per barrel. However, now it recovered back to 14. It's very difficult when all of your economy depends on just like one resource, oil. And let's take a look at the other Russian imports besides natural resources. Mostly it's just military weapons or vehicles or ships, or it's metals, aluminium, iron and steel. And the rest is not significant rubber, plastic, gems and food. And that's pretty much everything that Russia imports. And you probably wonder what Russia looks like. And it's a huge country where 60% of land is frozen and nobody lives there. And the rest 40%, it's mostly just fields and forests and small wooden houses built like 500 years ago, and lots of concrete block buildings, like 5 stores with very small apartment rooms, and communists built them after Second World War too. And of course it was very difficult. They had to build them fast and cheap, and the quality is not that great, of course. And however, it was difficult times for them because the western part of Russia was destroyed by Nazis, and eastern part of Russia wasn't inhabited by people, so they had to build them all around the country. And this is pretty much how Russia looks like. And most of the people, they live like remote areas, villages, because there's no work there. So they had to go to big cities, and it makes that like large cities are overcrowded, and province, like remote areas, it's not enough people there. And mostly who live there, just people over 50 who are addicted to vodka, and that's it. And usually small cities, it's rather depressive thing, because it's just those buildings built around some sort of manufacturer, and most of these manufacturers, they designed for war needs, so they produce different vehicles and equipment and details for war military needs, and therefore now it's pretty much useless. And fun fact, like 70% of these manufacturers are abandoned and not working at all, so they're so useless. So I'd like to build new Russia from the beginning and build new production, like let's say IT technologies, like software or mobile phones, and it will give work to people, because there are lots of intelligent people in Russia who are IT technologically advanced. So I'd like to build a better future for them and for everyone in Russia, because let's take a look at the American imports, and like 12% it's computers, devices, and electronics, and 11% it's oil, 10% it's different machinery, and the rest is gems and pharmaceuticals and different spacecraft aircrafts. This is how economy in 2020 needs to look like. So you can see that Russian economy is outdated and not working, useless. And that's why my first reform will be building new productions and making workplaces for people. However, this is their first, like 1/3 of the budget, and 2/3 is taxpayers' money, and it's money that deducted from income, like 20%, and deducted for pension fund, like 15%, and it's money that, like for example, value-added tax. It's when the product makes its way from production to end consumer. It goes through different stages, different intermediaries and wholesalers, and all of those stages are being taxed, and which results that end consumers pay those taxes. Or let's say it's tax like company tax. It's when all the companies need to give some of their net profits in taxes, and of course end consumer paying for those taxes, and different taxes on imports and exports and access like alcohol or tobacco, and all those money, they go in the same budget. And when there is no oil, then taxpayers have to pay even more money, and that's why new taxes being imposed and implemented in Russian economy recently because of oil prices for oil. However, let me tell you, so we got lots of money anyway, And let me tell you how Russian government spends this money, and this is it's like budget expenditures is also what I would like to reform. And like most of the budget money supposed to go to different social programs like pensions, like allowances and different social benefits. However, it's hard for me to say that all the money find its end consumer, because let's say in Canada is really social government, and yeah, there are lots of homeless, but they're being like supported by like monthly payments like $1,000, and because government trying to protect the most vulnerable layers. In Russia it's different, and I don't even want to talk about pensions. And the next expenses is national defense, and pretty much money that Russia spends on wars in Syria, Ukraine, and therefore and trying and mandatory military service, which is so terrible, which I would also like to cancel. And so I think that this expense is kind of probably necessary. However, I don't know where the money go. And the next is health expenses on health, and yeah, if you've been to Russian hospitals, not in large cities, however, in the rest of Russia, like 95% of Russia, it's so terrible because it's very old buildings which are even not safe, and there's nothing there. And doctors, they don't have syringes, they don't have simple protective equipment, because they don't have money. Where the money go from budget, I don't know. And the next expenditure is educational, and I don't think that the spending is also working, because job of a teacher is low paid in Russia, and most of the teaching staff, it's either like Soviet orientated ladies over 80, or it's very young people who just cannot find another job. Because when I was studying for interpreting, people who didn't speak much English, they becoming like they were studying to become a teacher of English language, and people who speaking English more or less fluently, they were studying interpreting, because job of teacher is so low paid. So I don't see how the budget money are spent efficiently for that matter. And the next expense is police, community, and safety, and they have, I would say, rather average better salary than usual in Russia. However, mostly it's just people who are physically strong and not very intelligent, maybe like in any police. However, in Russia, all the responsibilities is just to defense, protect Russian government from meetings, and that's it. They're not doing anything, they're not even probably smart enough to do like something. And the next expense is state level expenses, and particularly this expenditure is working because our president, the only person who actually doing something in Russia, he gets his salary from this expenditure, and however the rest is just salaries to different executive officials, deputies. There are so many of them in Russia, and they're not doing anything, and they're like Diktilov, they're not like really intelligent people, and they get salaries from the budget, and they're so corrupted. So I don't know where the money goes. And the next expenses is cinema and culture, and it totally dates back to Soviet Union. All propaganda and all the movies need to be sponsored by government because it was all so patriotic, and it's same in Russia. And usually it's just movies made for government money, where most of the money is being corrupted, and terrible movies, usually about war or history of Russia, and that's pretty much it. And the next expense is social media. And it's mostly TV propaganda, which is also very similar to Soviet Union, where government used to spend money for propaganda, like communism and everything. And still in Russia, I think that government doesn't need to support neither cinema, neither culture, neither social media, like pretty much in the United States. They don't have that kind of expenditures. And let me tell you more about American budget expenditures, so you have an example how the economy should work. And the first expenditure is food and agriculture, and it makes sense to invest in like remote areas, in small cities, even villages. So they have infrastructure, so they produce food, everyone's happy, comfortable lives, and they have budget expenditures on that. And next is transportation. And you can see it because in the United States there are lots of highways, interstates, like 5-6 lanes, and lots of bridges, and they spend actually budget money, and they're not so corrupted. And the next expenditure is science, and I think it's very important to spend on science because lots of smart people, they just live in Russia, lots of scientists, because they don't have like basic equipment to do their studies, and in the United States they have everything. So I think that Russia needs to spend more money on science. And next expenditure is energy and environment. And forgot to say, in Russia there is also expenditure on environment, which is hard to imagine because Russia is so polluted. There are lots of like toxic waste everywhere in Russia, which poison land, poison water, poison people. Lots of people have cancer. Garbage is not recycled and just being dumped. It's so terrible situation in the environment. So I don't know whether like around 0.67% of budget money, I don't know where they go because I don't see they spend it on environment, and that's one of my next reforms also. And the next expenditure in United States is housing and community, so they actually spend money to build houses for people, like budget money. In Russia it's different, and some other expenditures like Medicare and health, education, government. However, it only makes 50% of all budget, and another 50%, which is $600 billion, is military expenditures. So it's money on wars, like let's say in Syria, where people just gather in groups and trying to kill other people, trying to like destroy, maybe not with purpose, buildings of just citizens, and spend so much money and risking their lives. And it's so expensive. And in my world of future, beautiful world of future, people would apparently reduce their spendings on wars. And therefore, I'd like to conclude that I presented two reforms on budget incomes and budget expenditures in Russia, which will definitely work and make lives of regular people better. Thank you so much for listening. It was great having you.